This is homeroom, right?
Exactly, announcements coming up. Wow, who was that?
That was extra.
You good? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nags Head Planning Board meeting for Tuesday, July 15th. I want to briefly welcome our new member, Brad Carey. Thank you for your willingness to serve, Brad, and welcome. Glad to have you here. So let's move on to our next item, which is the approval of our agenda for today. Have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Moving forward to public comment and audience response. Doesn't look like anyone's here to talk to us today, so we'll move right through that section. On to the approval of our minutes from the May 20th meeting.
Can I make a motion?
You may. Everybody read the minutes, and we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And several seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, great. Moving right on to our first action item, which is consideration of a text amendment request submitted by TW's Outdoor Outfitters to amend the Unified Development Ordinance to reduce the required building separation from 20 feet to 10 feet when the additional building serves as an accessory use to the principal commercial use on the same site.
Good morning.
Hey, Kelly.
I apologize. I was under the impression that the applicant would be here this morning. It doesn't seem that he is. So I do apologize for that. But I will go ahead and kick off the review, and maybe he'll show up while we go through this. But as you noted, this is consideration of a text amendment submitted by Chris Greening of TW's Outdoor Outfitters to amend Section 10.86.2.4.2 of the UDO. This is part of the commercial design standards, and it relates to building size and dimension. The proposed amendment would, as you said, reduce the separation between structures on one site from 20 feet down to 10 feet. The applicant's request was specifically to reduce it to 10 feet when you're talking about a principal use adjacent to an accessory use. I did put a link to the entirety of the commercial design standards so you can see how that relates to all the standards in general. But I did put that specific section 10.86 in your code, so you have that in front of you. The first section there, 10.86.2.4, states to prevent the appearance of large, disproportionate, and or strip-style buildings, the following standards shall apply. The length of the principal building shall not exceed 3 times the width of the building, and then it goes on to tell you how you calculate that. We don't need that for the purposes of this conversation, so I won't belabor it. Gives you a diagram to help you understand that. And then the next section is what relates to what is being proposed to be amended. It states properties with multiple buildings shall have each building separated by at least 20 feet and shall not have the appearance of being one structure. For example, multiple buildings may appear to be one structure where there is a continuous roof line over the main structure that carries between the 2 buildings. The next item was just relevant, so I included that. It does state that buildings shall be connected using exterior pedestrian walkways. So background on this is the town first adopted their commercial design standards in May of 2004. Some of you may remember that whole process, but it was lengthy. There was a lot of citizen input, a lot of conversation that went into it. Obviously, the intent was to promote development that's consistent with the desired architectural style and design of the town. And it was to show how we emphasize smaller scale structures, and we actually want to discourage the long linear strip style buildings. So it's pretty fun. I got to pull all of the old ordinances from the library and had our town clerk, Brittany Phillips, help me with it. But just for historical background, our first zoning ordinance in 1977, we didn't have that specific 3-to-1 length to width limitation, but we did have a section on group developments where we said group developments are allowed, they're a conditional use, and the multiple buildings on the same site had to be separated by 20 feet. So that was really the first time where we see that 20-foot separation come in. Then in 1983, that introduced the language limiting the length of the principal by the width. So that's when that whole 3-to-1 criteria came into play. From 1987 through 1988, there were several amendments. But from that point forward, we carried the 3-to-1 length to width ratio, as well as the 20-foot separation for group developments and shopping centers. So for any of y'all that were here when we transitioned from our zoning ordinance to our UDO, you may remember that every single use had all of the conditions beneath it, as well as any architectural requirements under that use. So when we transitioned to the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance, that's when we took all those specific criteria for architectural design and placed it in the commercial design standards. So now when you're looking at the commercial design standards and in the UDO, you don't have all those specific uses with specific architectural guidelines. It just applies townwide. So as you can see, the 3-to-1, the 20-foot separation, which was, like I said, prior to 2019, was included for shopping centers and group developments. That's all been consistent back to 1993, and even back to 1997 in some ways. So with this longstanding emphasis on separation and scale, you can clearly see that it's the town's desire to preserve its character, promote pedestrian-style development, and avoid the visual monotony of large, uninterrupted commercial facades. So one thing to keep in mind is this is a text amendment. It would be easy to kind of think about a site plan in mind here, but I wanted to reiterate, it is just the text amendment. It is not site-specific. And text amendments would apply townwide. We're not just thinking about Mr. Greening's development. We're thinking about the entire town. The 3-to-1 length to width and the 20-foot minimum standard, it does present design challenges for him specifically. But again, I wish he were here to have the conversation, but he's not, and I apologize. He could perhaps give you a better indication of what his overall vision is. But for the purposes of the text amendment, it's not required. The applicant did put in his application that these requirements do not apply within the C3. So I did want to note in your staff report that in 2024, the applicant, Mr. Greening, did go through the process of rezoning this specific property that he's looking at from C3 to C2. And at that time, he stated that rezoning was due to a desire to pursue constructing uses such as retail that was not allowed in the C3. So that was the purpose for the rezoning at the time. The C3 is exempt from this 3-to-1 requirement because it is intended for those higher intensity utility light industrial based uses. And when you go back to that area on Satterfield and Lark and Aves, you see that. You see what that looks like. So with all text amendments, we do look at the comprehensive land use plan. And we did have some policies in there that related to this request. The first policy under our land use requirements states that we want to ensure the character of Nags Head is preserved as a single-family residential beach community with ties to its natural environment. And that's defined by development that blends with the landscape, preserves natural vegetation, open space, environmental quality, and buildings with a residential scale that with an appearance of low heights, small footprints that are designed to reflect the heritage of Nags Head, and commercial development that serves the needs of the residents and visitors, but also respects the goals of the community related to design. Land Use Policy 15 states that we want to promote architectural standards for commercial development in keeping with the Nags Head style and architecture. And Land Use Policy 24 states that we want to support land use compatibility and business development through flexibility in the application of design standards that achieve project goals and preserve the spirit and intent of the town's ordinances. So specifically, Land Use Policy 15 talks about how, with relation to that, staff should do an analysis of what's out there, see what complies, what doesn't comply, talk about those and see if our current standards are meeting the desired design criteria. So I did not pull site plans for all of these. I did use Dare County GIS and the aerials that we have on there, as well as their parcel cards. But in looking at some structures that we have out there now that kind of meet that strip style development, we have Outer Banks Mall, and that was constructed prior to the adoption of many of the current architectural standards. We have Croatan Center, which was developed in 1996. It appears to meet the 3-to-1 ratio, and the buildings are separated by 20 feet. They do have some eaves and overhangs and things like that, so from a distance, it doesn't necessarily look like 20 feet. And they also have a continuous roof line that makes it appear that it is one building. Surfside Plaza was developed in 1978, also constructed prior to many of these architectural standards. However, it does meet the 20-foot separation, which came into play in 1977. I have no idea if that was purposeful or not, but it did.
Probably not.
Serendipity.
Pirates Quay, that was developed in 1984. So that was constructed shortly after the 3-to-1 requirement, and when I look at the aerial, it doesn't appear to meet that 3-to-1 ratio, and I can't explain why. Maybe it had something to do with the time the site plan was submitted. Maybe that site plan was in the pipeline when the amendment was approved. And then more recently, we have South Beach Plaza, which was developed in 2007 and 2008. And that was developed under the group development standard. Those buildings do comply with the 3-to-1 length to width ratio, and they are separated by 20 feet. This development demonstrates more compliance with the commercial design standards and does offer a more articulated and visually separated form, especially from 158. So staff's analysis, after doing this research, staff would not support the proposed text amendment to reduce the required building separation from 20 feet to 10 feet for accessory use buildings, or for any building for that matter. The current standard is not just about function, but it's about the visual form and character desired by the town. And we believe that the 20-foot separation serves a purpose. It maintains the desired architectural style and visual breaks along our commercial corridors, and it helps prevent the appearance of larger strip-style developments. It enhances pedestrian and public experiences, creates more human-scale environment with a sense of space and openness. It promotes environmental benefits, better air circulation, light penetration between the structures. You're getting some actual airflow and light. And it can also serve as a place to manage some stormwater when you have those separations in there. It also improves fire safety and building access, ensuring emergency personnel and equipment can adequately access areas between the buildings. And again, I've noted, while this is a request for a text amendment and not site-specific, I did reach out to our chief building inspector and the deputy fire chief because I didn't want to pursue any amendment that directly ran afoul of any of their codes. And they essentially both said there's just not enough information at the time because this is a text amendment and it's not a site plan that they can review. But that in reducing it, there would be some fire suppression measures that would come into play. And Deputy Fire Chief Shane Height did note that there could be some changes in an upcoming newer version of the fire code that would be more stringent in terms of access routes and accessibility, and that's something to think about moving forward. But again, without a site plan in front of them, they could not make any recommendations. Allowing this reduced separation, even if it is a secondary structure and an accessory use, we feel that it compromises the intent of the standard from a visual standpoint. The reduced distance with roof overhangs, et cetera, would still convey the appearance of one structure, particularly from 158 or neighboring properties. And the accessory function of the interior space is not really relevant when we're talking about the visual effect. We've already talked about how the C3 is exempt from those standards, so I won't go back through that. I did note in your staff report that if you are inclined to recommend adoption of this text amendment, to please just keep in mind that it does affect all commercial development within the town. It's not site-specific or property-specific. It would apply town-wide. I've kind of already gone through that staff recommendation there, but essentially between our staff review, between the comprehensive plan, between everything we've discussed, the history of these ordinances going back to 1977 and 1983, staff's recommendation would be for denial of the text amendment as it's been presented. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kelly. Does anybody have questions for Kelly?
I have many questions, but they're mostly for the applicant. But in this situation, as it exists presently, or even with the kind of gapping in of this area, is that area predestined and must be kept clear by code as be accessible for emergency services, fire, et cetera? Is there anything like that cannot be blocked? Is there any verbiage like that in there?
For the 20 feet?
Yeah.
So not in the commercial design standards, but if Shane Hyde were to have this plan in front of him, and that separation is what's needed to get that hose within 150 feet of any area, which I'm not Shane, so I can't say it well, but if that space is needed to achieve, to pull hose, then that would be a requirement from the fire department, that access be free and clear.
Yeah, in the specific application, if I pulled up the tax map, which is, I'm sure that you certainly looked at it much more than I, it's pretty tight there as it exists on the back side for accessibility to the structures, and the existing business, especially this time of year, it's quite busy. So they're kind of in that space presently. Yeah. So I
have noticed parking is an issue at some.
Interesting. Yes. Satterfield Landing, because of the disconnectedness of the feed-ins, because it's not a straight cross, there's no shortage of accidents in that area. And this would, I'm sure that as we surpass carry capacity for everything, on a regular basis, it's just going to get weirder and worse.
Make sure I understand. What do you mean by there's no straight cross?
So it's a T-junction,
right?
That causes a backup on the south side with anything that wants to carry east. So the light is a T with no easterly outlet.
Right.
So what it means is there's a lot of traffic flow that is trying to go both directions, and then it tends to stack in both directions in the turn lane, which causes a pretty frequent tap and grind, or pedestrian issues, crosswalks, etc. So this whole area, the way that there's also a drive aisle in front of TW's, which carries into Satterfield Landing from the south side and kind of carries around. So this is just, there's a lot going on right here. And as well, if it seems that the owner of this property is also the owner of the property that is due west of it. So it seems, and
Yeah, so
Yeah.
again, we're not
Right, it's not
site
site-specific.
specific,
right,
but this request is being generated from a desire to continue this kind of the length of this accessory structure here, through this area and
So-
provide
so
parking.
if that's the desired effect, would that become, it's impossible to say because the applicant isn't here, but in your communication with them, is the desired effect to carry on and do some sort of retail adjacent something
Yeah,
the whole way back, so they're continuing, yeah,
I believe his desire was to, have this function as one structure, sort of attached to the accessory structure that is existing, with more retail and more storage, and perhaps even another little smaller retail structure over here on the west side of the property. And in talking with him, that would obviously run afoul of the 3-to-1. So there has to be separation in there somewhere. So whether the separation was going to be here, and then pick up with a row of buildings here, or whether you would continue this to your 3-to-1 and then allow a gap, in the building here.
right.
It was just, where would the gap be? It would have to be 20 currently. Could that gap be reduced to 10? Is where this precipitated from.
Right.
So my understanding of what's going here, he just wants a bigger building, right?
Yeah,
I
Is
think he's
that
wanting to
what we're looking at here?
maximize.
Yeah,
I think he's wanting to maximize lot coverage, space.
Right.
All of that while keeping in mind that, the septic system for this is going to take up a good amount of space. Parking for this is going to take up a good amount of space as well.
so he says in the application, if the planning board denies his request, if amended code is unsupported, property owner will most likely rezone back to C3 and develop less appealing light commercial service bays as previously approved.
Yes, so that property it was C3 prior, and there was an approved site plan for a trade center there.
Yes, there was.
you were here for that, we
Yep.
were here.
Yeah, we did that.
So, that is not what the applicant wanted to develop. He didn't want to do that industrial style, he wanted retail. So that was, what precipitated the rezoning. And so now it seems like he's hit another obstacle that he's trying to navigate, but to rezone this back to C3, that's something that I can't even speculate on.
Right.
It's another public hearing,
Mhm.
it's more public comment, it's, okay, now, staff went through the process of advocating why it was appropriate for C2, so it might be interesting to see how staff now advocates how it's appropriate to go back to C3.
Well, and it wasn't just staff, it was both boards
Correct.
that were very
Yeah.
supportive. It made sense to make it C2 because
Right.
of the other surrounding properties and uses, and there's some residential there, so I think all in all, people were pleased with the
Yes.
change.
Right, and
So,
I'm not sure that we need to make a townwide change because his business model has changed.
so let's, if I may, David, I didn't mean to cut you off, go
no,
ahead.
that's all
Well,
right.
I was just gonna, it's an unusual morning because we're right now in the phase of asking questions of staff, right? And the applicant's not here, so I guess we should probably just, to follow protocol, see if there's any other specific questions for Kelly about the text amendment and that process. and then we'll move on to our discussion phase, and everybody can
Okay.
weigh in, right? Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. So does anybody have, and it's tricky for you, Kelly, because, you know, nobody wants you to speak for the applicant. We do have his application, so that's helpful. Does anybody else have questions for Kelly?
No.
I do not.
No.
Just one quick one, the visual you showed a little while ago with the main store and then that accessory unit behind it,
Yes.
does that meet all the current C2, the 20 feet?
does.
Okay, so we're
Yes.
good in that particular
Yes.
instance.
I have a wee bit of a question. The property adjacent to the south, is it appears to be kind of right on the line. Is it within existing codes?
So these lines, I will say, aren't 100% accurate. So
Never are.
Plaza del Sol, and it was
Poké Box.
constructed
Simply
in
because the way
2003.
the confluence of the properties does create some safety issues.
I would imagine that this does meet the 10-foot setback that was in place at that time, and it, you know, it doesn't appear that it does. I will say, again, it's somewhat site-specific, but because this is developed residential, depending on what use goes here, that 25-foot commercial transition protective yard would be required. Because you didn't have that separation between TWs and Plaza del Sol.
Right.
Because it was commercial against commercial.
Right.
But any development on this property is going to abut residential, and so that greater buffer yard would kick in, regardless of what's developed.
One more question. If there was an effort of the property owner to combine these lots into one lot, would that affect anything?
It wouldn't, the zoning remains the same. It would still be a continual C2 zoning, which my gut was that if he were able to accomplish everything he wanted, he would combine these lots at some point, because he might very well have a building straddling these lots. But, I don't want to speak for him, but nothing would change.
I would only say that we can only take this application at face value because the applicant is not here. We can't try to imagine what his motivation is and what his actual plan is or may be. And this is a text amendment that would affect the entire town, and I think that's the way we have to look at it.
Okay.
So,
I do have one question, Kelly, for you, I think, or maybe more than one, that I think is appropriate for you, for staff. And that is, can you talk a little bit, I'm trying to figure out how to say it, about accessory use for commercial? I mean, that isn't something we hear a lot about. You have retail space, and then you have retail space, and there's storage on site a lot of times. I'm just not familiar with a lot of reference to accessory use to commercial. Is that
So
historically an
it-
issue?
It hasn't happened a lot. I think a lot of your commercial, they incorporate that storage into the principal structure. But in this case, I believe they had a lot of inventory, like too much backstock and inventory to store it within the building and maximize their retail space. So this building back here, it's subordinate in size, and it meets those criteria for accessory structure and accessory use. It's storage for the product within the principal, and it's just where his staff are going to replenish goods. Trying to think if there's any other.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, not to put you on the spot, but do you know of anybody else that has a similar situation in town?
I imagine this building for Ben Franklin is somewhat similar. I imagine that this is storage.
Mm-hmm, right,
Mm-hmm.
but that's definitely
There's-
accessory subordinate, if you will, and it's not, getting bigger or expanding or,
Correct, yeah, to take an
The-
accessory and then attach it to or closely keep it in the same design schematic with other principal. I understand what you're,
yeah, well, and the other thing I will mention, it's sort of part of the question, I just said we're not gonna get into discussion, but I noticed in the application, he mentions, online sales as well. So that may be something, I ask you this now to see if you can shed any more light on any discussion about that, but also, and I'm not opposed to online sales, we all know it's how the world is in large part now, but that may be something that the town needs to consider moving forward, if there's a movement towards people, our retailers, doing online sales that require space, that's not allowed. So we don't know, again, because he's not here and because he doesn't say, what proportion is actually retail backstock and what proportion might be inventory for online sales. And that's not, I'm not making a judgment. I just, if that's a thing, we need to be thinking about it and looking forward, in my opinion.
no, I think
Because-
it's a good idea. I will say that we do have one business here in town that does have some online sales.
Mhm.
I think the majority of their business is online sales, but the district that they're in specifically speaks to the ability to have warehousing and processing.
Mhm.
So I think when you're looking at online sales, maybe a warehousing or a storage area is maybe more suitable than a accessory
Right.
designation.
And I think that we should try to be aware of the changes in retail, and if we're, and is this actually just, is this
Right.
retail, which we've always thought of for all these years, as long as the town existed, as being on-site retail sales, So, anyway.
Is back on, is kind of another property that is a little similar, back off Satterfield Landing, what used to be the old Artisan Stone. Is that similar? Would that be a similar use, where there are two businesses on the same property, actually more than two businesses on
So
the same
there
property?
is a lot of history with this site.
Okay,
It is C3,
Okay.
so this 3-to-1 would not apply in this scenario because it is C3. When this started out, this was the showroom.
Yep.
And this was the processing.
Yep.
And then, I guess when that went away, the town approved a text amendment for multiple principal uses, which allowed them to utilize these spaces separately. But again, it was in the C3, recognizing that these large buildings, as some businesses move out, they may have to be repurposed.
Yeah. And this kind of does feed into the online sales. The business that's there presently does do a lot of sales through on wheels kind of deal, where they're sending things out. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Kelly regarding the text amendment request?
I just wanted to say thank you, because that's really thorough, how you went back and looked, when the certain, codes were written.
It's helpful, isn't it? And that's
Shout
good.
out
It's
to Brittany
helpful to have,
Phillips, too, 'cause she
really.
yeah, because, we take Kelly for granted, but Brad, thank you for reminding us how helpful their presentations are. We don't take you for granted, Kelly.
It's okay, it's fine.
Okay, so let's move on to our next phase, which is discussion and a recommendation.
Well, the reason this applicant put this in is clear. He needs additional storage and retail space, and he wants to shrink the distance between the buildings. And we're talking about the whole town here, though, right, for a text amendment?
Correct.
I think based on what Kelly's staff put together, we've got enough there to concur with her staff and say no.
Okay.
I'm also really concerned with the law of unintended consequences. As this scales town-wide and it starts to fit into every niche and cranny that has been created, how will not only that function, but that will look, and what problems will be knock-on created. The dominoes will fly in every direction.
Correct. And you know, we're always looking at redevelopment, I am. You
Mhm.
don't know, we don't know what's coming, you know? And so again, with the changes in retail and sales, online sales, retail, we especially need to be tuned in, I think, to making changes that'll affect. I think the history of the commercial design standards, like you said, them giving us so much information, and there's nothing significant that has changed that would, you know, directly affects this. It would make us say, oh, that doesn't make sense anymore for this reason or that reason, you know, so I would agree. You don't-
Yeah, I agree.
Anybody? Anybody want to? All right, well, I'd love to entertain a motion.
Make a motion to turn this down.
We have a motion to deny the text amendment request
Second.
and a second. All in favor? Oh, excuse me, any further discussion? Oh, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Of denial? Anyone opposed? Great. And we will move on. Thank you, Kelly. Let's move on to our report on the Board of Commissioners' actions from June 11th and, oh, that's right, July 2nd, because we didn't get updated in June, did we?
We didn't, and there's not really a whole lot. I'll move through it quickly. I did want to point out that at their meeting, the board did do their presentations for the Nags header and the Lightkeeper. And the former deputy planning director, and he was planning director for a little while as well, Bruce Bortz, who passed away recently, was awarded the Nags header, and Webb Fuller was awarded the town Lightkeeper. So that was exciting if you were able to see that meeting. What else? We had our public hearing for the rezoning for this property here for the fitness center. That was approved. Also, the text amendment that went along with having the fitness center and all the accessory uses incorporated as accessory to municipal within the village SPDC institutional district. We looked at the site plan for the fitness facility, and that was approved. And they formally appointed Basil to the Septic Health Advisory Committee, so that was pretty much. Oh, also at the June 11th meeting, that's when they appointed Brad Carey to the planning board. So that was that for June 11th, and then for their July meeting, I think this one was pretty sparse. We just held a public hearing for the Hargrove Street beach access grant. That will be coming to you in the form of a site plan eventually for your review. And that's it. That's all we had.
Okay, great, thank you. Anybody questions or comments about BOC actions from June 11th and July 2nd? Okay, any town updates requested? All right, let's move on to our discussion item H1. Continued discussion of strategic plan action item 2.2 as it relates to the examination of allowable uses within the commercial outdoor recreation overlay district.
So we are having technical difficulties
Again.
again.
No, that's actually pretty rare. Okay,
So
well,
what Joe's going to show you is this really cool animated depiction, and I think it just takes up a lot of space, and it's difficult to get running sometimes. But
well, so is this our break, this is our chance? Should we,
do you want to move on to the?
yeah, let's move on, and then we'll come back when we get it straight. So the next thing, of course, would be your director's report.
Let's see. Okay. Do we have two of these as well?
Yes, I would assume.
We do. So we will start with, I believe, we're kicking off with the July meeting. The Septic Health Advisory Committee, so we are going to be meeting, I think it's the 30th of July, the end of this month. So that will be our quarterly meeting. We're just going to wrap up the framework for this Division of Water Infrastructure loan. The last thing we have to do on that is really on staff, which is determining how we're going to pre-qualify are contractors with the Davis-Bacon Act requirements related to wage requirements and the American Iron and Steel Act. So that's really the last piece of that. And then it's also got to go to the LGC, which Amy Miller, our deputy town manager, has scheduled. Estuarine Shoreline Management, we're moving forward with that. I want to say everything came together really quickly, and Joe might have to jump in and update on this, but some of the work that they had been doing on site has been completed, and they do have their design report ready. And we're planning on, I'll let you jump in. We've got some updates and some community meetings coming up, but I think Joe.
Great.
So they've recently completed a lot of the modeling. The basis of design report is scheduled to be done August 1st, which will be all of that data and then that initial design and concept design for both the sound side event, or excuse me, I'm thinking what I'm gonna do. The Villa Dunes Drive site and then the Sound Side Road sites. So at least, conceptually, it's going to be some breakwaters in the Villa Dunes site with more living type structures and more plantings adjacent to the Nags Head Woods, and then smaller, less vegetated sites as it goes down on Villa Dunes. And then looking at the Soundside Road site, it's going to be mostly marsh sills with smaller breakwaters. The point is to minimize the impact to SAV, which is essential to get permits. So putting breakwaters out into the sound, basically permitting agencies don't want to see that going on top of subaquatic vegetation, because it'll basically damage wildlife, and the erosion benefits don't really offset that.
So it's mostly,
impact.
what was your first term?
A marsh sill.
Oh, marsh sill, okay,
Yeah.
I thought you said marcel.
But I want to
French.
wait for,
French.
the engineers
Right,
to finalize everything,
I'm
because
just-
they've just completed sort of this modeling and looking at how the sand comes off of Jockey's Ridge and how that sediment moves through the sound. So it's been interesting looking at all their maps and data. I don't want to sort of
Right.
preempt their design and
Right.
findings, but at least like the notes and discussions, it's going to go like a larger breakwater closer to sort of the north part of the Nags Head Woods, and then smaller breakwaters. And then with the Soundside Road area, obviously there's a lot of private property, so it's a complex legal situation given the riparian rights, the easements that would be necessary, and then the very dense subaquatic vegetation throughout that area, which is great for fish and life, basically, but makes it challenging to design structures that would be permittable and help reduce erosion for those property owners. So looking forward to receiving that report. Following up that report on August 7th, I believe that Thursday right after the board meeting will be our community meeting. So the consultants will be here in town. We'll have a discussion, sort of in-house, and sort of they'll release that, those findings, and then we're gonna have a community meeting, hopefully in this room, that evening, to get property owners here, and there'll be, design boards to help people understand and answer those people's questions.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have one quick, I just was curious, it says, the drone imagery was 98% accurate. What does that mean? Why wouldn't it be 100,
So the drone, we flew, Soil and Water, with Dare County flew a drone. It was able to capture all of what's underneath the water and capture all these, what mostly was subaquatic vegetation, but in a couple instances we thought it was SAV, but really it was like rocks or sediment.
Or tires
It
or
did, yeah, and it wasn't.
okay, I was just curious, interesting to me. So 98% is really good.
Yeah, which confirm that, it's a helpful way to delineate
Right,
SAV without having to go out there and do all of that, because it is a large extent.
and so Dare County did that, huh?
Yeah, they participated.
That was
and-
nice.
And appreciate Charlie for his help with that.
Well,
yeah.
Mhm.
because does the town have a drone?
I believe police
Yes.
does, but,
Yeah, I guess I do know that.
we don't have one
But-
that has the, sort of the
That
s-
capability
camera to
Yeah.
capture the
That's cool.
multi-spec differences.
Well, thank
yeah.
you to Dare County then for pitching in.
What happens if we have a hurricane and this stuff gets washed away? Do we just lose the money, or like, do we get another grant, or like, or get
It's
our
a-
FEMA covered, or what?
It's a great question. It's
Uh-huh.
actually one I have pending with the consultants, if they have examples of other living shorelines that have been damaged, and then, like our beach is basically that work is reimbursable through FEMA.
Mhm.
But I haven't received a response to that, but I can also say that one of the big benefits of living shorelines is that they are resilient, and there's, lots of sort of information on, basically, like hurricanes that have destroyed bulkheads and destroyed hardened structures, but those, living shorelines survive, those plantings survive, and they do a great job of just capturing sediment and being, resilient through large
Yeah.
storms. But I'm not an engineer, so I don't wanna sit here and
Yeah,
guarantee a level of, storm that they can handle.
yeah,
Right.
just curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
It's a great
It's a
question.
good question.
It's actually like the huge thing with NOAA, how survivability, storms, sediment, vegetation on both sides, that's a whole rabbit hole of information and study. There's a lot known. It's interesting though, because we're so close to the Duck Research Pier, that's where a lot of really good research is being done. We could be a test bed. I mean, as an idea for a grant, because we're so close and they've got such a long period of time, it would be neat if someone had some ideas about other things that work, maybe we could become a test bed for good ideas with them as the outsource through the Army Corps.
Yeah, it's innovative project. I mean, I in working through this process, there's not many examples, certainly not in the Outer Banks of sort of breakwaters like this with private property. There are with sort of larger state-owned property,
Mhm.
but to sort of coordinate this with a lot of private property owners and considering access and all the public accesses, and then, private property access and property rights, it's certainly a fine needle to thread.
People approach this with a lot of caution because of the amount of outlay there is, and really, the return is minimal. It's more of a we'll wait and see effect. So the Army Corps kind of has created a rubric to follow, and everybody seems to fall inside that gap. Yeah.
Well, hopefully the return won't necessarily be minimal. I'm not trying to be.
Well, no.
And have you seen what they're doing at the north end of Jockey's Ridge State Park?
Oh no, and kind of where.
Very effective.
No,
It's
what-
been very effective.
No, it is really effective, but it's really incremental. It's very dependent upon, what kind of a year you have for weather, what kind of year you have
Yeah.
for this or that. It's like, renourishment is a great idea until you have a really bad day. Yeah. Look at Soundside. One event pushes a hole through the beach and, kind of redrafted everything, here, short term. So, everything seems to be, I really like the a soft application of natural stuff as compared to the rigidity of, of some of these structures that are put in, yeah.
There's several along the Sound side, in the village, the Sound side access
Mm-hmm.
has used that, and along the golf course on the
Yep.
Sound,
Mm-hmm.
have used that very successfully,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's held up to all of the hurricanes.
I
And,
just think it's great we're looking at that side of the town.
Yeah.
I really do.
yeah,
I think it's-
certainly.
Um,
I certainly agree.
And so staff are Joe, are you involved in the grant application right now? It says staffs, so that's due on the 17th or whatever, so.
Yeah, Amy and, has done, you know, most of it, and then, working with our consultants, but yeah, we're applying for that because the current grant funding for those two sites got us to 60% design and then through permitting. And so what we're applying for is to take us from 60 to 100%, basically design documents that we can put out on the street and get bids for.
And
to
bids.
construct.
Great.
Yeah.
But it's a different
nice.
pot of money for construction, so we'll have to get some other.
It's nice that
money.
it's going along so quickly, pretty quickly.
Yeah, but
relatively
there's
quick.
quite a few, you know, complexities to move forward with.
Right. Okay, so, that was Joe jumping in on your report, right, Kelly?
It was.
Are you, so you want to come on back up and finish for us, and then, you might as well finish, and then we'll go back. Are you all ready to do the cord?
I don't know, it seems as though his computer may.
It's not,
Kick the bucket.
it's not gonna happen?
Oh, Lord.
Is that what you're,
I can pull up the
Can you
staff
pull it
report and just talk about it, but my model is unfortunately on the local drive because it's, you know, very large, so I don't throw it on the shared drive.
okay, well, we can still talk. It's okay if the dog ate your homework.
We only have a blackboard and some chalk.
That's right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it, you wouldn't want to see me up there trying to do that.
I mean, I need my computer,
Gotcha.
So I will, go retrieve.
All right,
Okay,
so,
so we're gonna go back to your report,
we're
Kelly.
gonna go back. Sand relocation, was the next item that we had to talk about, and so this season is complete. We had 94 people apply for the dune management cost share program. It ended up coming out to be about $213,000, maybe a little bit more. So the board allocates, the past couple years, the board has allocated $400,000 for this, and we were obviously below that this year. So I think what happened is we are in a 3-year cycle. So as part of the dune management program, you can get $3,500 for your sand relocation and your dune stabilization. Or if you're not doing sand relocation, you can get $1,000 for your grasses or sand fencing. And we had a lot of people participate that first year, and so they're not eligible for that full $3,500 until this 3-year cycle. And so I think this is why this number is low, but next year we should see people who took advantage of it that first year circle back. So I mentioned to the Board of Commissioners, I do think that the $400,000 is adequate and will be used. And they had asked for some mapping and some data to show how many people used it that first year versus the second and then this year. So to know that we can anticipate more usage in the coming year. So that's going to be at the Board of Commissioners August meeting. And we talked about the Hargrove Street access grant. That's just for some improvements at Hargrove Street. You have to go through the process of the public hearing, the site plan review, et cetera. And again, like I said, you'll see that site plan when it's ready for approval. And then Dowdy Park Farmers Market and everything that's going on with all of our parks and with the Art and Culture Committee. There's just so much. Like right now is the prime season. We've got several types of fitness activities going on. We have our summer concerts going on. Family fun times, that's somewhat new. It used to be on Tuesday evenings, but now it's Tuesday mornings. We're having a lot more participation now that it's in the morning. Riptide, the Corolla horse, was here last week, and I think that was a huge success as well. They have another activity for kids. Kids move more. And then we have the Wagon Wednesdays at the dog park. So just a lot going on. And speaking with Paige, she is exhausted, but everything's going really well. And everyone seems to be very excited for that. That's really all I have. The one thing that I did notice up here in our monthly activity report that I will mention is a huge shout out to our environmental planner, Connor Twitty, who operates our septic health program that Basil sits on the committee for. So he, probably for over a year, has been talking with the Waterworks Department for Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. They're predominantly on sewer, but they do have some properties that are serviced by on-site septic. And it's sort of that, the way he put it was these areas are land rich but money poor. And so being able to extend sewer to these areas is becoming difficult. So they are putting together a program very similar to ours to help service those communities there. And they actually came up, I thought they were here for like 2 days, but they ended up spending probably 4 or 5 days. But they met with staff all day, we went through our program, they went on site. Connor showed them how he does his inspections, what he looks for, how to clean the filter, like all the things that we offer people that they are going to try to start offering as well. But then they hung around for the farmer's market and actually came out and saw Connor at his little town table at the farmer's market, and so that was really cool. So it was great seeing another municipality see our program and want to look into it and maybe do something similar, and to just see Connor stepping up and doing such a wonderful job.
How did that town find out about Nags Head and all the works going on?
So they had actually said that numerous people had, once they spoke with them, had recommended they reach out to us. I know one was maybe ECU, East Carolina, and also talking about this, which I didn't list this, but we did get a request in October to go to a symposium in, is it Beaufort, North Carolina, or Beaufort? I know between
North Carolina, Beaufort,
It's
South
Beaufort in
Carolina.
North Carolina.
Okay, the North Carolina version. Connor has been asked to be the guest speaker at a symposium there, talking about on-site septic systems, wastewater, and water quality. So that's awesome.
That's cool.
That is
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah,
And
getting
in
a lot
my,
of recognition.
in my old world, when other organizations came to, we called it a benchmark, to do a benchmarking trip to your organization, that's very flattering.
Yeah.
It really was, and the fact that they hung out and
Yeah.
continued,
Right.
yeah, it was great.
Basil, there's also a restaurant owner in Nags Head who owns a restaurant in Mount Pleasant, who ironically appears to be putting in a new septic system at their restaurant as we speak. So
Yeah,
there may be some connection there.
yeah.
Kelly, with the zero interest loan program,
Yes.
is that money, do we have that money and we're trying to figure out how to use it, or we're hoping to get that money?
So we have it,
Okay,
but it's not gonna be awarded until we give them our scope,
okay,
and they review our scope and determine that it meets all their criteria.
okay.
So it has been awarded, we just can't start dispersing it until we get the final sign off.
Okay.
Which, like I said, we're really close. We've gone through the process of identifying those high-risk properties. Those are going to be those that are near a water body, have not had any septic upgrades, maintenance, anything like that within the past 5 years, haven't used the program, and are at an elevation of 3 feet or less. I think we identified maybe between 280, 300 properties that meet that criteria.
Wow.
And so we don't want to just open this up for everybody. We really want to target those high-risk properties. And so finding a way, whether it's probably not a cold call, because that might scare people, but getting a communication specifically to them about water quality, the age of their septic system, and the fact that we do have money available if they want to participate. It's really cool.
Yeah, great.
It is really cool.
Dowdy Park, we had no idea. It would be kind of this avenue for so many directions. One of the things that I'm happiest to hear about is it's very difficult in your job, Kelly, or in any municipal government job to be in a position where you're talking to somebody in an informational point of view, where it isn't a contingent of adversarial contact, you know, where they're coming forward, they want something from you. And in that way, I feel that it's made the town much more approachable and soft. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this was completely unforeseen. The fact that we're talking about a parks thing, that was not an idea, that wasn't I'd never heard the S on park. You know, it's just really wonderful to see that we have developed this adjunct to government because of vacant land, that a chance was taken. And I feel this is, an extension of this is, you know, possibly moved into something as simple as just every beach access. You know, has there ever been any communication about establishing any kind of parks plan for any of the town's oceanfront areas?
As far as our beach accesses?
Yeah.
There has not, thus far. Right now, to be honest, we're focusing on extending these activities to Whalebone, to Barn Street, to the dog park. As far as the beach accesses and them being really purchased and developed under CAMA grants, I don't really know how much we could do there, but it is something to think about.
What I see is that we have really three different types. We have underdeveloped property where there's really not much going on there, parking accesses where there's minimal and a walkover, and then areas like Bonnet Street and Epstein and Hargrove where there's more development gone on there. And, you know, it's kind of stepping up in that direction. And I just wonder if there isn't some opportunity for some enhancement just by inclusion, by, you know, if there is no conflict within CAMA to do that, because everything happens on the east side of the dune is open. And so it's not part of the space, but it's included in the space for everybody's point of view.
It may not be what you're thinking about, David, but we do have our groundwater loggers and our water quality loggers. We do have
Sure.
those at the Bonnet Street Beach Access, which, once everything comes together, that's going to be a huge educational component to have
Right.
people come and look at.
There, and
Things like that.
and
We-
countywide, there's more than a couple of those,
Right.
as I remember.
Yeah.
Countywide, there's also some more of that, and it'd be interesting to see if that stuff starts to share around a little bit, so we just understood it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's everything from your report, Kelly?
It is.
Thank you very much. It was comprehensive. Joe, are you ready to talk with us?
Sure thing.
So we'll go back to discussion on the commercial outdoor recreation overlay district. I, for one, think we need to rename that thing as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
I mean, somebody, I think, Molly, you were the first one, you know, but
yeah.
it's just, anyway.
I don't have any better idea.
Hence
So,
the
yes,
acronym.
let's talk about the cord. I do apologize, my computer was working fine this morning. I've had some battery issues. I have a battery on order, but between taking it, unplugging it from there and bringing it to here, it seems like it is now
Retired?
It gave up.
I guess it's too big to email it to.
So the dog ate your homework?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to tell us?
So the dog, yeah, basically. So I had a really cool animation, I promise.
I'd
We'll see.
oversell it at every opportunity.
We'll see it next time.
Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
perfect.
So, maybe for Bradley's benefit, but for mine as well, just to kind of start at the beginning, we had a strategic plan item to look at our UDO and our comp plan in relation to the cord, and basically, are there areas of incompatibility? Is our zoning doing what our comprehensive plan says we should be doing? And if not, where not? And so here's that item right there. in our strategic plan, identify and correct areas of land use incompatibility within the town, correct inconsistencies between the comprehensive plan and the UDO, and some items to consider, and you can see D there is to examine the allowable uses within the CORD. And so, in March, staff prepared a existing conditions report, which basically looked at what had been planned and how development has occurred since the commercial outdoor recreation district was established. And then, in looking at the comprehensive plan, how development has gone, and then other plans like the transportation plan, our pedestrian plan, the secondary transportation improvement plan, which is a regional prioritization of transportation projects, and basically looking at all of that comprehensively and saying, do we like what we see? If not, you know, what's incompatible with what happened, and can we or should we tweak zoning? And we had that discussion, and planning board's answers are in red, and basically what we discussed and what I heard was we generally like the mix we have of commercial outdoor recreation and the visibility of the sound. We like the reduced heights of most of the structures there, but we have to keep it that way. We don't want to see some of the undesirable development that could potentially occur given the underlying C2 zone, that anyone can develop any C2 use in any of those core properties and basically break up the continuity of the area. And then we kind of talked about what are some other things that we can do to basically encourage what we want to see. And one of those things that the comprehensive plan sort of highlights is making the area more walkable, making it connected, especially to the Whalebone Activity Center, and integrating those uses and that whole collection of outdoor rec, as well as with retail and restaurants and mixed use that the comprehensive plan sort of speaks about. I think right now it more or less functions as highway commercial than more of a true activity node, like a true pedestrian connected node. We do have the multi-use path that provides that connection from sort of the northern to central cord, as I sort of, further divided in that cord report. But maybe more could be done. And some of the things we talked about was, shade trees, maybe better lighting, maybe public art, as well as potentially extending the boardwalk now that the Townside Event Center has an approved site plan and has put out for bid construction of the boardwalk, at least for their section, which is, a rather large section of what's in the cord. But some other points were that we could, look at zoning, and we looked at that in that cord report. We looked at maybe some uses that we really don't want to see, then some things we could do that we could maybe make accessory to outdoor uses that maybe would be a benefit for the area. And then the comprehensive plan really talks about mixed use, group development, these things being things that would be desirable in the area, and our ordinance doesn't allow for it. So I think that's a big opportunity to look at when considering the incompatibility between the zoning and what our comprehensive plan says we want there. Then in the May meeting, sort of synthesized that conversation we had in April and laid it out, and what I heard was, we need to prioritize, and we need to probably engage the public on some of our considerations. And so we've been working on that, and for this update, I had this model that was going to have a still image of it here, just for, just to visualize, just to sort of chew on as a planning board and kind of discuss, and it would have been easier to kind of obviously look around. My computer decided not to cooperate. But, it would give us something maybe more to kind of conceptualize and discuss in a more real way. Again, it's just a concept, it's just a visual. But I did look to prioritize from all of the, sort of that larger discussion, you know, what can we work on, what can we actually do, and what can we kind of move forward with? And I thought maybe there were three large things. Number one was really to consider extending the boardwalk to the outlets. Number two was to change the zoning to increase the flexibility of uses within the cord. But given SB 382, we can't remove a lot of the uses we don't like. But let's just not focus on that, and let's just focus on what we actually could amend, which is maybe adding some of these uses and making mixed use and group development possible, and helping commercial outdoor rec uses stay there as opposed to, you know, becoming a large residential use or some random other C2 use that we've kind of discussed in previous meetings. And so, you know, I put sort of a next steps here, and I thought today would really be a further discussion about fine-tuning these key cord area planning priorities, whether you agree with staff's analysis, whether you think we should focus on something else, because we have talked about a lot, and we're kind of going from wide to more defined. Now we have Bradley here who, you know, knows the area well, and hopefully has some great insight. And so, you know, just to look at the zoning more specifically, I think this appropriate land use table that's in our comp plan is pretty key. And, you know, the sound side activity node basically overlays with our commercial outdoor recreation district pretty well. And you can see, you know, specifically what the uses that we say we want, that the community wants here. We want sort of this blend of multifamily, hotel, which we got one hotel. We try to pull that hotel overlay district. SB 382 kind of took our legs out from under us. Mixed use, commercial, office retail, restaurant, but not drive-through. Indoor entertainment, indoor outdoor recreation, water-dependent uses such as a boardwalk, pier, accessory water-dependent uses to commercial use, mixed use, or hotel. Again, our zoning hasn't really supported that defined development that we want in our comp plan. And then some other things we have down there: gallery, museum, institutional uses such as parks, and then even fitness studios. And so I kind of pulled out of that cord report those yellow and green uses, the things that we can do to add to our zoning and not just take away, so we wouldn't require rezoning and to get all of private property owners' consent to rezone. And so some of those things for discussion are in yellow. You know, residential, based on, again, this land use table, we could look at making cottage courts, maybe our new small multifamily or our two-family as accessory to a cord use. We can make those zoning text amendments. Bed and breakfast, potentially recreation, beach recreation sales, again, group fitness, aerobics, coffee shop, juice bar, ice cream shop. And then, you know, looking at those definitions of multiple principal uses in group development, we don't have outdoor recreation uses included in that. So like you couldn't have a putt-putt and a restaurant on the same site. Maybe that's something that, again, can, in the long term, encourage some of this development to stay there. We don't want it to necessarily become what could be a by right large dwelling, or multiple large private residential dwellings to kind of cut up the corridor. And I think we kind of agreed that if all of the commercial outdoor recreation uses went away from the area, it wouldn't be desirable. You know, we want that to stay, and maybe we want some of these other mixed uses to help them. We can't pull some of these uses that could come in future redevelopment, but maybe we can incentivize a more mixed use, and through some of these zoning changes. So I'm happy to open it up now to the.
One question.
Yep.
Right now, can a commercial business have an accessory use that is housing for their business? I mean, I know that's ADU oriented, but like right now, could you do that?
So,
What was the question?
can a commercial business right now in this area have a residential accessory use?
So they can, but probably not in the context that you're thinking.
Okay.
So we do allow commercial with accessory residential
Mm-hmm.
in all of their zoning districts.
Okay.
And it essentially allows, any commercial development to have up to 3
Okay.
dwelling units as an accessory. There's some parameters about where it's located on the lot and
Mhm.
how big it can be. And there
Okay.
might be like a 1,000 square foot
Mm-hmm.
cap on habitable area. But when we went through the multifamily process,
Mhm.
we did talk about the next step is going to be finding a mechanism
Mm-hmm.
to allow multifamily in that more dense capacity, not what we currently have as an accessory, on properties that have already been developed commercially.
Okay.
So,
Like above the food lion or, yeah.
correct,
Okay.
we have not done that
Okay,
yet, but we know that that was the next phase.
okay. All right.
Good question.
Yeah.
I think it's important to get this business community involved as soon as possible, because I've noticed like one of the businesses that's here that's recreational oriented, I think is closed, like the bumper boats or something, like, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
It does not look open.
Hey, Molly,
Uh-huh.
will you speak in your mic?
Oh.
People contact me sometimes and say they can't hear us.
Oh, okay. I just
Thank
said, I
you,
think we should get
please.
the business community involved as soon as possible so that they know we're looking at creating something cool here. So don't sell your property quite, like,
Yeah.
because redevelopment would probably be a huge attractive potential for some people.
Yeah.
And I noticed that this one business seems to be closed, and Kelly can probably fill us in, or Joe, but it's
So-
like the bumper boats or something.
Yeah, they're not closed, but
Okay.
unfortunately, the bumper boats, I guess, were not profitable.
Okay,
So they have, poured concrete, they filled the pool in.
Okay.
They're adding more parking.
okay,
That property is owned by,
John Van Lunen.
Brian Wilson.
I thought-
John used to own it, but Brian Wilson has Miller's right beside it.
Oh,
He has since purchased it.
okay,
Jamie Moore is operating some of the recreational uses,
mhm,
but the bumper boats, I think the ice cream or the frozen yogurt, whatever was going on in that building
mhm,
has ceased. They're trying to revamp it.
okay.
But I do think Jamie's still running some of
So,
the.
as
So
a
it's-
recreational
Recreation.
business.
So it's just
revamping.
parking right now, pretty much? It's parking? What was a
No, where the
recreation
bumper
business?
boat-
Yeah.
Yeah, where the bumper boats were,
Mm-hmm.
that depression, it's been filled in,
Right.
and they're going to stripe that for additional parking.
So now they're bumper cars.
Should,
Yeah.
should we have a field trip down there, y'all,
Maybe.
Sure,
sometime?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
I have the keys to the
Right.
adventure park.
Yeah, we can have a team building exercise
There you
too,
go.
while we're down there. But all joking,
Trust
I for
falls?
one, I mean, I go by there and I go down to parts of it, but it might be helpful to us to
We
go
we
as a
could-
group.
We could do group trust falls.
Remember, right,
Yeah.
remember when we did Whalebone
Or is
Park?
that's an election? That might be an election,
Yeah.
actually.
If the whole board goes, Lily has to come and take minutes. Yeah.
I think we did it in pieces when we went to Whalebone, right?
Probably, yes.
Just two at a time or whatever, yeah, yeah, so that, but we might could get a waiver to let us all go, we don't have to discuss. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, good
Anyway.
idea.
I also
I'm
like the
sorry, but-
idea that's on here about, it was Gary's idea for museum, and when he was on the board, he was talking about having a Nags Head museum.
Yeah.
And I think that would be so cool, and I know the property's for sale with all the Nellie Myrtle collection, and I asked the lady the other day, I said, where's that gonna go if you sell your property? And she didn't really 100% know, so,
right,
I think it'd be really cool to get a Nags Head museum idea floated out there.
It would be.
Yeah.
we've got a lot of great ideas.
Mhm, yeah, we do. No
Just how
money
do we
and-
get,
yeah.
Joe's trying to get us focused on how to, how to move forward.
Anyways,
So,
We have been initially contacting some business owners and do hope to, potentially at the August meeting,
Mhm.
maybe have some
Okay.
business owners here and have a more open discussion about that.
how about the Board of Commissioners feedback? What,
Well, I plan on sort of having a more complete animation and sort of running it through rendering software and kind of, delivering this, presentation
Okay.
to them at the August meeting and getting more direction
Great.
and what their thoughts and, are generally on the work we've done so far.
Good, that would be helpful, I think, yeah. Okay, so, I think some of the additions, if you will, recommended changes to be permitted as accessories, are interesting. I agree with what you've suggested pretty much. I can't see any, and I think it might be helpful if we gave people some more leeway to do something, and like Molly said, then, let them know that there's changes, because everyone automatically thinks if you're changing anything, you're taking something away. So we have to, well, I think it would be good for us to try to make it clear that that's not what's going on. So. So you think it would be helpful, Molly, to encourage mixed-use residential?
Oh, well, I mean, if that would help somebody maintain a recreational business here, I'm willing to carrot to keep this area more as a recreational district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm, going off of the comprehensive plan and what what our vision was for this activity center and in the court report, there's sort of all the narrative around it being a walkable, connected center, and so, these uses are allowed as well as this sort of commercial mixed use, and I included the development here. This group development definition means a group of buildings on a single site which are occupied and used for professional offices, retail, professional services, indoor recreation facilities, and/or restaurant uses. I can see that being outdoor recreation facilities as well, and allowing the group development to include an outdoor recreation use and retail and a restaurant. And I think that's a logical allowance for the area based on what the comprehensive plan states and envisions for the area.
Have we alerted the Visitors Bureau that we look at this, or that we're looking at this sort of protection of the area where they are? Would it behoove them for the area to be nicer?
Yeah, I haven't reached out to them specifically. I've sort of been in contact with Diane just about sort of the status of the boardwalk, but I haven't sort of said, hey, we have this great concept. But hopefully within the next few months, if there's support, I can.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be good. And then renaming it. I mean, we've talked about it before, all joking aside, it just doesn't have a feel for,
It needs a name like Whalebone, because that's so distinct and
Right.
nice, beachy sounding, like this area.
and that's not
needs a
gonna,
name like that.
that's not gonna go away, even if we connect the two, it shouldn't, it won't,
No,
you know what I mean?
It just needs its
So,
own cool name.
But court, nobody knows what you're talking about when you bring it up,
Yeah.
I mean, right?
It's clunky.
Clunky?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I don't
clunky.
think that would ever be the final name for the area, but it is useful for the purposes of what we're doing.
Right, but the sooner you
Yeah.
Sure.
rebrand, the better, in a way. I'm not saying we have to find, but anyway.
It's kind of chicken and egg at this point, it's like if the plan is gonna continue in a direction, it'd be neat if there's a confluence of ideas behind a name.
Right,
Would be great.
right. What did you, somewhere in here I saw that you put like
Sounds
park and stay, play all day or
Park
something?
wants play all day, the
Yeah,
Popad
park wants to
district.
play all day, yeah, that's like
Yeah.
a
Well, I heard-
amusement park
Park wants
slogan.
and Stay all day,
How
that's
about-
right.
Joe's place to hang out. Yeah. Come
Anyway,
see-
it
yeah.
just,
No, but it's, I get that this kind of also feeds into what Molly's saying. If we're gonna, if it would make make it more aesthetically pleasing for that sort of development as with an idea as well, you know, if there's an impetus to it. I think it's a great idea.
Those culture and arts folks have a lot of good imagination.
know.
That'd be a good task for them. Not that I'm, can assign work, but maybe we could ask them what they think, come up with
Right.
something.
I mean, Joe, you're calling it Soundside right now, basically.
Well,
Yeah, I
and
mean-
that's,
We've got
Makes
the,
sense.
what,
Yeah.
Soundside, we've got the Soundside event site, and we've got the sound, I guess it's just the Soundside boardwalk, right? In Nags Head, the Soundside at Nags Head or something, you know, we wanna get Nags Head in there.
Yeah, I'll let everyone else kind of weigh in on the best name,
Joe.
you know,
Well, the new guy has to name it, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sound side, event side is, but that only kind of incorporates
The event site
that,
itself,
yeah, the event site itself.
but the Soundside District, it lets, even, well, there are people who come that don't know what ocean that is over there. But most people would realize that if it is the Soundside District, that it's over there,
Right.
not over there.
Right,
So that's a start right there,
right.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all this, and coming on, building the adventure park in 2014, that's when I thought that the boardwalk was gonna get made.
Right,
So for me, I just think that the focus should be to just get something done, like to actually build the boardwalk. I mean, I thought that it was already decided, and it was like kind of beating a dead horse, is like, we need a boardwalk over there to get people, you know, to get all those connected. And then I think your connectivity of like having all the recreation there is kind of gonna come.
like automatic,
Yeah.
yeah.
'Cause
You're right.
if you have a recreational idea, like, I don't know what else we could have. We have the putt-putt, you know, have the go-karts. At Adventure Park, I mean, the event site's like a big open area, so besides like a pool, which I think there was a big,
There has
there was a big poll done by Dare that just came out. My wife was telling me it's like 100 pages. I wish I would've brought it, but
It's been an ongoing issue forever, I think, as far as having a public place for people to swim, that's accessible to
Yeah.
everyone. You have to belong to a club or a.
yeah, the
Or pay
Parks, the
dues or-
Parks and Rec in Kill Devil Hills is just slammed.
Right,
I mean, it's over capacity because everyone on the whole Outer Banks goes there.
right,
And it's like part public, part private. But I think that, you know, we could contribute to that in this town with that specific site, because that's really the only spot that's there. You know, you have the tourism board that has quite a bit of money that they wanna boost tourism.
and they've got the,
Shoulder season
they've got the
especially.
pickleball,
Yeah.
pickleball courts going in too, you
Mhm.
know, so there
It-
is a
there-
lot going on, and I agree with
Yeah.
you that, you know, if you build it, they will come, but on the other hand, we don't wanna be back on our heels when it happens, because
Yeah.
if the bidding's happening now, right, for the boardwalk? Or,
Just
Yeah.
their portion though, right?
yeah, just their portion, but,
In the meantime, we want the businesses, the recreational businesses that are there to stick it out and stay while these boardwalks are being built and while these new things are
Right.
coming.
Well, I
Right.
think that, like, that is an incentive for them to stay
Right.
there, exactly.
We don't wanna lose them to redevelopment while we're making these plans.
right, right,
Yeah, and I really thought, like, the magic number for, like, somebody to travel from somewhere, to park their car and get out and have an experience would be like a 3-mile trek. You know, so like, if you could go somewhere with a group of friends, park, get out and walk and exercise for like 3 miles. So, I mean, that could be like a target.
yeah,
kind
we
of-
talked about that sort of thing, but we never had a distance, but that probably
Something to
makes
shoot
sense,
for.
yeah, because anything less than that might not draw as many folks, and you don't have to go the full distance,
Right,
you know, so.
yeah.
And then, of course, if there was some art and some
Oh, yeah, all
food
that
and
stuff.
everything else along the
trees.
way, trees, shade, you know, place to picnic, whatever.
Shade and, you know, we're all experiencing the heat, not today, but last week, that definitely is something, how much,
Absolutely.
what is it, a shade area
Mhm.
experiences a temperature differential anywhere from 10 to 25 degrees,
Mhm.
to the other area, and people collect where it's cooler. Yeah.
I mean, and having a place where you can get in the sound, I mean, I know that that's probably taboo because you have to maybe potentially bring in sand to make a beach or something, or you
Yeah,
could
they're
put
not
some
gonna-
artificial something down just for
I
people
talked
to
to
get
Cam
wet.
about that, yeah.
But Jockey's Ridge is mobbed as well. It's exploding with people because it's the only place that you can go and get in the ocean or get in the sound.
Yeah, yes, that is.
I don't know where everybody stands, and I'm kind of putting myself out on a limb, but it's something that I've probably been thinking about for 10 years straight.
Yeah.
So I do have some.
There's a lot of restrictions
Built
on
up.
what you can do on the
Right,
shoreline.
of course.
Well, this is a little bit of where I was going when I mentioned to Kelly earlier, the idea of parks, I was thinking oceanfront when I was there, but I was also thinking about, the sound side accessibility. We do have some sites over there. And when you do this, is there a possibility of creating kind of a park-ish adjacent thing,
Yeah.
and then maybe that becomes something that helps? Is there, if it were to go down that road, is that another possible grant, maybe adjunct, where you could get, somebody to throw some more money at it? If it was made into something like that, I don't know. A stretch, sorry.
He might have lost this.
You're
Well,
saying
The
get
private
like,
property.
Well, okay, so the town does own some property in this area. There is that one little sliver where, people sail out of. And the question is if there would be any interest in, kind of maybe making that into something different, where it becomes a hangout, a park, a place where people could go and get out of the sun, maybe dangle their feet in the water. Because there is a beach of a sort. It's different than the other beach, but yeah. And if park starts to become something that's used in that, is there any other grant funding bucket that could be accessed?
I mean, I think there are grants available, like part of grants, even CAMA grants, but I think it's an excellent question for our future update of a Parks and Rec plan, as well as this discussion on the boardwalk, which, as Bradley said, is in our Parks and Rec plan and featured there. And I think through that update process, these are hopefully things that, through this process, we can vet out and say yes or no and have a harder look at that. And so I appreciate the question, and I think it would be possible if there's support.
Where is that sliver of town property that you're talking about?
We're talking about the Harvey
Sound.
the Harvey Soundside
Yeah.
tract?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
There's a
Okay.
couple different spots over there that have been, maybe they're not always still there.
But there isn't much of a,
Yeah, there's not much there,
It's pretty slim.
yeah.
right,
It's just a
But
little.
It's
like
kind
a
of in the
little
middle of
keyhole.
everything, yeah.
Well, yeah, you have the kite
Right,
boarders,
yeah.
that's like a famous
Okay.
kiteboarding
Mm-hmm.
spot.
yeah,
People
except
come
the
from all
access
over.
isn't so great,
The
right?
access
Because
is
there's no way to,
terrible.
there's nowhere to rig,
Inaccessible.
No, there is a place to rig,
there is?
right behind Miller's, that big
Okay.
grassy field.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect, it's just you have to walk through 30
Marsh.
feet of just like mud up to your
Right.
knees. Yeah,
Right,
it's probably terrible for the vegetation there to
Right.
get trampled on like that. So it's making it kind of unstable, but
And this site is a part of our ESMP as well, and we have received funding to do some to do a living shoreline here as well, and then keep the public access.
There's that, and then there's also another spot.
is the other spot on the other side of
Yeah,
Tan?
there's
or
another spot, just a
outlets?
little ways north of that.
Oh, north, yeah.
are we still talking about town-owned stuff?
Yeah, town-owned property,
That corner, keep going.
yeah, it's,
It's that last
Yeah.
lot. that empty lot.
Yeah.
Nope, the next one north,
And this,
I think it's the one on the sound, but.
Not that far. I wasn't looking that far north. Anyway, it's a rabbit hole.
Isn't it that?
No.
That's not owned by the town?
It's a little zigzaggy
Yeah.
one. It's, I think it's like one of these two here. It's kind of got a dog leg in it.
well, we own that one. This is,
That's what we just looked at.
Dare County and the town, but part of the Soundside event side.
Okay.
There's Soundside,
Okay.
there's Miller's. This is
Okay.
also
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we were,
There's a piece
Peaceful.
up there.
further down?
No, you were just on it at Forbes North. It's north of the 8-track.
Is that right there, right? That's owned by Nags, though.
Yeah, not really much access, but.
Cause that's where we originally talked about ending the walkway and having some parking there.
Mhm.
Oh, 10 years ago.
How is that accessible?
The boardwalk,
Yeah.
that's not there.
Well, no, I realize
Right, but
that.
as, right now,
So
you
the
mean,
corner is, the street comes down right there up at the northeast corner, I guess.
mhm.
And then
Okay.
Old Road is a dead end right
I
at
was
that.
kind of looking at.
This is my house right here that he's pointing at.
Okay.
That's your house?
Yeah.
Looking good, Molly.
That's my neighbor's house.
Is that the same one?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what they're
That's
talking about.
parking.
Okay, cool.
I'd like to have that house.
Who owns the lot behind that one? Or does the town own that too? Is it private? Ownership.
Sandbar LLC, Sandbar.
No, Terry.
Oh, okay.
So we're thinking, and we're identifying these. I'm trying to get us back focused. David, you started talking about where the town-owned property from the standpoint of,
Yeah, you just, just kind of, there are some policies that are different for parks as compared to just an access. And I wonder if there might be any more opportunities for funding for development if it was labeled as a park as compared to that. And that's kind of the rabbit hole I was looking at.
right? Of course,
Um,
we, as you well know, we'd want to have an actual goal, what we're trying to do,
Well,
other than just funding.
Well, I was kind of looking at parks policies in this town, and there's really not much there. What behaviors are acceptable, unacceptable, et cetera. And I'm not saying that I'm looking to exclude anything, but I was wondering, it's a bit of an opportunity because we have a vacancy of a policy on what is the difference between a town-owned access and a Dowdy Park, as far as what you can do other than what we were doing at Dowdy Park. So if there was a different version of a park within the town, how would it be? Satterfield Landing has vacant land associated to the ball fields. Is that a park? There's a dog park there. That's a park. So what I kind of wondering is if it was, in some areas you have parks where visual arts are previewed or are a kind of cornerstone of it, then that makes it something of a gathering area. I feel like that's kind of what I'm looking at. If we build it as that, it is associated with the boardwalks, it becomes a collection point for people to go to while they're going between these other owned properties. That's kind of where I was, and then it becomes a reason for somebody who has an adjunct property to take advantage of adding on to the extended walkway that's going there because
And
of
their
what's.
proximity to this.
Yes, Yeah,
park.
the value added to their property because of the extension in addition to the walkway.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's kind of one of those things, and when we start to look at all this land, even though it is disconnected and it might not be quite accessible, if we started to do this, maybe, you know, it becomes something quite different. Dowdy Park, when we originally did it, when we were originally pitching it, the fact that we didn't have a plan was seen as a problem. Now it's created all this opportunity. I'm kind of seeing parks as they exist, if they are not Dowdy Park, doesn't have a plan. So maybe what we could do is we could come up with some kind of a bucket for this and define that as some kind of a Soundside Park, if you will, or oceanfront, or oceanside, or waterside park, something. Yeah. I know it's a lot, but I see a lot of opportunity for commercial business to see opportunity, including themselves in it because of all of the add-on.
Connections.
Yeah. So what else do you need from us today, Joe?
I mean, I think ultimately, whether or not this updated core priority list, is something you guys can say, yes, that makes sense, or no, it doesn't.
Okay,
And,
so,
if there's any of the zoning recommendations included that you would say, that doesn't, you know, thank you for including that, but we don't really think that that should be included as an accessory to a commercial, that doesn't meet what we feel, you know, would really be in line with the area. And so I think those are the two things. If this priority list makes sense, and then if there's anything specific to the flexibility of zoning, those proposed uses, because as it moves along, they could potentially end up in text amendment form.
well, I like the updated priority list.
Mhm.
I don't have any disagreement with any of it.
No.
That's sort of what you were talking about, David,
Mhm. Yeah.
on the expansion, including greater mix of uses and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Support the extension of the boardwalk,
Mm-hmm.
change zoning to increase flexibility. We can't remove any incompatible uses right now, so there's not much point in talking about it. And then, work with property owners. I mean, there's nothing controversial in there, and I think it's
Nothing
right in
that's-
keeping
Yeah,
with what we've been discussing.
I think so, yeah.
priorities.
Would everyone agree?
Yep.
Yep.
Agree.
Anyone have any comment on the uses that I've included to potentially be accessory to commercial outdoor recreation uses? I mean, part of, you know, like the beach recreation equipment rental sales, I don't know if that fits or not. It's, you know, I'm sort of looking at the comprehensive plan thinking it is retail, you know, but it is sort of beach, but I could see that being, you know, something that's just an accessory to that, you know, again, allows these outdoor recreation
Right.
uses to have another thing, you know, and an accessory thing that bolsters their business.
And that could potentially include vehicles, mobility vehicles, golf carts, personal mobility vehicles for those who have limited range of motion, different things like that too. Because we're talking about a large area.
Well, at one point, when we had talked about bicycles as well,
Sure.
you know, do we want to make it bikeable?
Sure.
Like you're saying, people come down and have a 3-mile route to walk or whatever, but people might want to come down,
Yeah.
rent a bike, and ride around.
Mm-hmm.
And then
We can have lines.
the outdoor stands thing, you know, I know that, right now, they're allowed to be accessory to shopping centers and group developments. Do we want that to be accessory to outdoor recreation uses, you know, maybe a conversation on sort of that versus like brick and mortar, is that fair? Is that, you know, the way I see it as reading the comprehensive plan is it would maybe make the street a little more interactive, you know, people are driving by, you see an outdoor stand, nothing's as interesting to people as other people
Mm-hmm.
standing and being outside, and, you know, maybe that's a benefit, but maybe, you know, maybe there's a devil's advocate side to that as well.
My guess is you'll get some pushback on that.
Do you have any idea why? I mean, what the, well,
All I can say is I
Gotcha.
understand that,
well, I think, you know, if you can make it accessory use to a shopping center, why can't you make it accessory use to a outdoor recreation
Sure.
business,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I
And-
will say it's important to note, right now, outdoor stands, it's very clear the uses that you can do with that. It's produce, hot dogs, ice cream, Italian ice.
Right,
It's not this wide variety. It's very specific as to what
Mhm.
you can do, and I think that has helped in the past. People feel like it's not
a
a
threat,
free-for-all.
right?
Right, that's good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
okay, well, I appreciate y'all's comments and discussion.
It was worth the wait.
Yeah,
I wish I could've showed you my
thank you. We're
Wait,
gonna
well,
look
so-
forward to the,
Yes.
pretty thing, but
Come to the
we'll look
VOC
forward
in
to the
August
pretty
and
thing
see.
next meeting. And then,
Hey,
I really would like to think about maybe a little field trip
Mm-hmm.
to get down there.
Before the next meeting?
Maybe it should be before the next meeting, huh? While we
have a better
continue to
idea?
talk?
Mhm.
What does everybody
One,
think?
one of the things that I find really interesting, and I'm kind of digging into it right now a little bit, is bicycles and powered vehicles. There's a Rubicon across here, and right now people are taking e-bikes, one-wheels, all over the place. Those things fly,
Mm.
and if you modify them, they'll pass you on the bypass.
And they're quiet.
They're really, really quiet. They skirt all of the rules. They violate the rule. They step on every line. And as I understand it right now, the DOT is not limiting any of it. They don't really even have policy for a one wheel. If you have a one wheel on the beach, are you in violation of town policy? I think you might be, because it's a motorized vehicle. If you have a e-bike on the beach that's pedaled but has an assist, okay, that's the line. If it is not, so it's one of these things. So if we create a space where people can bike, they're gonna e-bike. And I'm not saying I'm against it, but I am
to
saying
consider.
when it's designed, when you have people walking and people going 25 miles an hour, enjoying the breeze,
Right,
surprises are gonna happen. And it's already become, I've had people get hit, and it's awkward, because they're, like you say, they're silent. I just, the other day, had somebody have a couple things that look like mini bikes on the beach, but they're electric. And they didn't see any problem with it. And it's like, that's a motorized vehicle. But there's no DOT standard, there's no town standard for it. So fishermen cruising up and down the beach with fishing rods on, that makes all the sense in the world in the off season. But during the summer, it's a little different. It's a different kind of Texas out there right now. So, yeah.
Well, and people coming down from the houses are not looking for motorized vehicles.
That's it. So the question is,
no, no.
so it's one of these things where the bike, as I understand it, the trail along the beach road, is that bikes can be on there, correct?
The use path?
Yeah, multi-use path, I was
No, okay,
thinking.
I just wanna make sure.
But could an e-bike be on there?
Yes,
And that, to me, is wild, especially considering that if you spend a few nights on the internet and wait for UPS to arrive with a package, you now have something. There was a longtime paramedic EMT who worked for Dare County who had modified his bike, and he died of a head injury back in Collington. And, so rules don't apply if you don't
well, that's
make
been,
it clear they should apply.
e-bikes on the multi-use path has been visited fairly recently.
Yeah.
The town did paint in multiple locations on their multi-use
The speed
path
limit.
at 10 miles per hour max speed or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, and then, one wheels and et cetera,
Everybody
et cetera.
follows those rules.
And,
Just like golf carts have to be street legal too, and you
They
can't
have
have
speed limit
12-year-olds.
signs on the highway
Can't
too.
have 12, yeah.
Everybody doesn't drive the
But
speed
anyway,
limit.
I don't think we're gonna, so Now we're getting in the weeds.
No, but it is one of these things, I think we need to keep a clever eye on where that market
Right,
goes.
and maybe if you can't limit motorized bikes, then maybe we don't want bikes in the court.
Yeah.
How does Duck do it with their boardwalk? Cause theirs is fairly wide. Are you allowed to bike on that one?
I don't know. You're not? No bikes on the boardwalk. But now, if you're talking about trails, you know, connectivity,
And then,
in the whole district. Right,
like, it just,
right. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't think you'd want anybody riding on the boardwalk. But-
Along boardwalk, you really have a hard time with that. on
Right,
the boardwalk.
absolutely.
They're much
So-
smaller than the multi-use path.
Right.
So back to our field trip, Kelly was saying that if we all go together, we have to advertise it.
Yeah, so if
So-
if there's a quorum of people, it's considered a meeting, we would have to advertise it, we would have to publish it, and Lily
Just-
literally would need to be there to
Right.
take minutes, so we just need to coordinate. It has to be
Do you all
advertised.
think, do you mind doing it? Would you, how many people would have, does staff have time to take us 3 at a time or whatever, 3? Somebody has to miss, right? Because we can't have more than,
Do you want to do a special meeting, or do you want to do it incrementally in groups?
I think groups makes more
Go look
sense.
at it.
what'd you say, Molly?
Or should we all just go look at it ourselves?
Well, that's true.
I kind of,
But it
out your
just,
window.
it's helpful. I mean, to me,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
it is.
helpful to have staff,
I-
somebody there, because,
I kind of almost think that staff, that makes sense with staff, but also in small groups, because there's more opportunity for, you know, for questions if it's a smaller group, whereas I'll keep you busy. I'm sorry to anybody else who goes with me, but I'll keep you busy. So, you know,
so,
maybe
so
nobody,
don't go with David.
that's it. Yeah.
So if you, why don't you do this and see, it's a very busy time of year, we know that, but I mean, if you want to throw out a couple of times it might work for one or both of you, then we can see, you know, and if everybody can't make it, everybody can't make it. We can't have more than 3, right?
I believe there's the.
Lily, what's the
Can't be a
quorum? Can't be a quorum. So, you know, if you have a couple of, and it's not gonna go on and on all day,
You also have like,
so,
There's 7
that right away.
member board,
there's one in grade.
so
There's a
I
bunch
believe
more like
4 is
that as well.
correct.
These are not.
So,
Threes.
so we can't have more than 3.
Oh.
So if you throw out a time or two or 3, you know, and we'll see what kind of response you get, and if everybody can't make it, or if, you know, maybe we won't
It's something.
have any groups of 4.
It's right away.
Everybody might not be able to make it at any given time.
When you start doing it, all that together.
Well, there's. And then we just go down there for half hour, whatever, nothing long, just put eyes on it and talk together.
Accidentally run into each other down there.
I'm there all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're through that, and now we're going back to discussion item number 3. Did you want to just mention that, Kelly?
Yeah, so at our next, meeting, we're gonna have a planning board training. Some of you that have been here for a while may remember those, but we just have the town attorney come in, do a 30-minute training with the board on the roles and responsibilities of the planning board, the types of things you hear, what types of communication are acceptable, what are not, what is ethically okay, just things of that nature. So big picture, what you should and shouldn't be doing. So that'll be at your next meeting. It's gonna be Lauren Womble doing that.
Okay, great, that'll be good.
Back to the court just for a second. I see
Oh,
in the
sorry.
in the next steps, we're talking about having some key stakeholders and property owners here for the August planning board. Or do we have enough time to make all that happen?
Yeah, I've been initially in contact with them. It's gonna depend on their schedule, you know, of course, and also what the board thinks and, you know, whether they, like the direction we're going in or not. So I would say pending those 2 things, I think it's certainly possible, and I will try to make that happen.
Okay. Pending the board as in commissioners you're talking
Correct.
about.
Yeah, and also their availability. If they can't make it, they can't make it. Maybe we can set up a Teams thing, you know, I hope, if my computer can work, maybe I can make all kinds of things happen. We'll see.
Right.
Thanks.
Will that include the tourism board, a representative from them?
Mm,
I don't see why not. I mean, I think it probably would be a good
think
idea
so.
to have someone just update on, you know, what they're doing generally.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good
I
idea.
think that's a good
Mhm.
idea.
Okay, thanks. All right, so now we're on Planning board members' agenda. Does anybody have anything for this today? Okay, and I do not have anything on my agenda for today, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I make a motion?
You may make a motion to adjourn, and we are adjourned.
Boom.
We don't need a second for that one. Oh, you are?
I don't own the land, I read it.
Where they-